Hello, and welcome back to the Secular Homeschool Revolution. I am your host, Ashley, and this podcast does not cater to white comfort or conservative fragility. So if you're listening to the show, I'm not great at sugarcoating things. I think I'm a little funny. And all in all, I'm just taking up space. This podcast is created for BIPOC, progressive, secular homeschoolers. Allies are welcome here. But you should understand that this work is a continuous journey for you to engage in. And it has to be more than just this podcast. So today we are talking about ABEKA, the curriculum that people swear is so rigorous, and comparing it to its ideological twin, Turning Point USA's curriculum. So they came from two different eras, two different marketing strategies, but they have the same fucked up mission. And it's to indoctrinate kids into white Christian nationalism. And we're calling it what it is, and we are going there. So let me start with rigor. That's the word people love to throw around whenever ABEKA is mentioned. Every time ABEKA gets criticized, somebody's auntie or some pastor or some homeschool mom jumps in defending it. But ABEKA is so rigorous. My kids are so advanced. It keeps them on grade level. They're above grade level. It's so challenging. And I want to break that down. So rigor in white evangelical curriculum is not about academic excellence. It is about obedience. ABEKA's idea of rigor is lots of worksheets, lots of memorization without the actual context, busy work described as mastery, writing fast instead of writing thoughtfully. It's a high workload with low critical thinking, and most of all, it focuses on compliance over curiosity. That isn't rigor. That's indoctrination with a spelling test. ABEKA confuses difficulty with depth, and it's overworking kids for educating them. This has been one of the most disciplined curriculums that I had ever seen. My husband did ABEKA. My Black husband did ABEKA when he went to Christian schools growing up, and so he was able to contribute to some thoughts while I was researching it. So he said most of all, as someone who's been in the realm of education for a long time and is an education consultant and even helping with homeschooling, he said ABEKA pretty much trains kids to follow orders and not to think for themselves. And when you add in BIPOC kids, that rigor is just another form of control. And ABEKA's heavy workload plus white supremacist worldview, it makes kids academically burnt out and undereducated in truth, identity, and history. So this rigor everyone loves so much, it produces kids who can write a perfect cursive sentence about a version of history that never happened. And I don't care about that level of rigor. So now we're going to compare ABEKA and Turning Point USA because I do believe it's the same mission with different branding. ABEKA is this old school indoctrination machine. Turning Point USA is this new propaganda pipeline with some fancy TikTok advertising and a bunch of billionaires backing it. So where ABEKA says, America is God's chosen nation, Turning Point says, wokeness is destroying America. You see? Okay, let's do it again. ABEKA says slavery was economically beneficial. Turning Point says systemic racism isn't real. I should keep going. Where ABEKA teaches kids to obey authority, Turning Point teaches kids to perform patriotism. So one is the blueprint and the other is just a reboot. but both exist to pump kids full of nationalism, anti-Black messaging, anti-Indigenous erasure, and colonizer myth-making. And let's go a little deeper, because this is where BIPOC families get caught up. So the rigor of ABEKA is culturally disconnected. There's no room for cultural identity, community narratives, or any celebration of Black excellence, BIPOC brilliance, so on and so forth. Everything centers whiteness and European worldview. And this rigor gets rewarded with assimilation. So kids who internalize whiteness do well. Kids who question it are labeled disruptive. And this rigor masks as racism. If a curriculum is harmful but hard, people will defend it like, as we see, they defend it like it's the holy freaking grail of education. And they'll say hard work builds character. And that is actually code for don't question this whitewash lesson. And we can go into rigor. This particular rigor trains compliance. It's perfect for feeding kids into this turning point narrative. So ABEKA produces obedient kids. Turning point catches them later and hands them into this, turns them into these nationalist martyrs. And I feel like it's the same pipeline. ABEKA lays the foundation. Turning Point USA builds the house. And I was nauseous at the fact that after Charlie Kirk passed away, or he was killed, he was murdered, they were sharing his free curriculums like crazy in all the homeschooling groups. And I get it. A lot of us are homeschooling on one income. A lot of us don't have access to ESA funding, because we see homeschool content creators who get thousands of dollars of curriculum shipped to them because they get ESA funding, right? Or they have a very well-endowed, family, high-income earners that can afford it. And so when we see some free curriculum, we want to jump on it, but this ain't it. and it was intentional why it was released for free. Yes, they were doing it, quote unquote, to honor his legacy, but that was a sympathy push as well. So who uses ABEKA and why do they do it? And why should BIPOC families run the other direction? So ABEKA is used heavily by conservative Christian homeschooling families, private religious institutions, church-based hybrid programs, new homeschooling families who are looking for structure, families who want predictable, traditional lessons. But BIPOC families choosing ABEKA, I know that's a red flag we have to talk about, because many of us come from church spaces. Well, I don't, but my husband did, where ABEKA was normalized. So it feels familiar, it feels comfortable, but familiar does not mean safe. When BIPOC families choose ABEKA, they unintentionally are normalizing, or intentionally, because I'm not going to front. I've met some melanated people who think white is right. It normalizes whitewash history. It introduces internalized racism. It strips cultural identity from learning. It upholds anti-Black, anti-Indigenous narratives, and it silences liberation, justice, and truth. ABEKA is not neutral. There's no way that you can pick up ABEKA and pick and choose the parts you want to do without it being harmful. ABEKA was not built for us. ABEKA was never meant to tell our kids the truth about themselves or the story of this country. It was to create a fairy tale disillusioned version that makes the white narrative superior. Do I feel like ABEKA and Turning Point USA curriculums are racist? I do. And I'll keep it plain. ABEKA is racist. Turning Point USA is racist. Neither are neutral. Neither are just educational. Both are full of propaganda. ABEKA is racist in its content, its narratives, its sources, its messaging, its framework, and its intent. as well as Turning Point USA, the talking points, the misinformation, the patriotic education, the political agenda, the recruitment tactics. These are not misunderstandings. These are missions, backed, especially with Turning Point USA, by billionaires. So we should continue to say, eat the rich. What do you do if you grew up on ABEKA? So if ABEKA raised you, you already know the damage, especially if you're here on this podcast. You grew up thinking questioning authority was a no-no. America was morally superior. Jesus spoke King James English. Black history was only like a paragraph size in history. Indigenous people just migrated gently and kindly because they knew that this white saviorism was in their best interest, and that activists are troublemakers. You don't want to be one of those kind. And white evangelicals were the heroes of every story. So undoing this takes more than just denouncing something. It takes years of work, years of unlearning, years of relearning, deconstructing, deprogramming, and healing. So if you're doing that work now, I see you. And it's not easy to unpack indoctrination built into your childhood, but the work you're doing is revolutionary. What do we do instead? How do we create a liberation path? We need to choose culturally affirming curriculum, decolonize history, use truth-telling resources, identity-centered learning, critical thinking, use art and storytelling for global narratives, use community wisdom, and rely on ancestral knowledge. And yes, there are some options out there. 3 that I recommend is Freedom, which is a U.S. history curriculum. It is secular and it's inclusive. And I think it's relatively affordable. Blossom and Root, which is also secular, and it gives literature nature-based emphasis, and they use a lot of diverse texts. I'm currently using Hearth and Story, which I think is pretty progressive and culturally affirming. And you also can make your own. So we can reject propaganda disguised as education. We also are rejecting revisionist history disguised as morality. We reject curriculums created to uphold the very systems we are trying to free our kids from. And in that rejection, we are raising liberated thinkers because our kids deserve more than obedience. They deserve truth. They deserve identity. They deserve freedom. In closing, I want to say choosing to step away from ABEKA, choosing to reject Turning Point USA, choosing to understand that you can't secular your way through either one of these curriculums, that you are choosing to decolonize your homeschool, because that is not small, that is not trendy, you're not being performative, it isn't symbolic, it is revolutionary. Because you're not just teaching reading and math. That's not our only focus as homeschoolers. We are breaking generational cycles of misinformation. We ourselves are breaking the disinformation of like a white supremacist education. And we are fighting against indoctrination and cultural erasure. And your kids can feel that. Your ancestors can feel that. Your inner child feels that. And the future will too. So if you want more episodes or resources, check out my blog. You can go to secularhomeschoolrevolution.com. Remember to stay bold, to stay rooted, and to stay revolutionary. Because your kids, they're just not learning. They are liberating.